Hello, and welcome again to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, Integrity Deficit Disorder. Today, we have as our monitor, me, yes, yours truly, John Smith again, to attempt to reflect on the elections yesterday. And same still have not declared. Some states have not declared. For instance, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia is the state that's got a runoff, and it's going to take an entire month. No, not a month. They said December the 6th. That's still a month, isn't it? More than a month. Nevertheless, we'll have a lot of more money being burned at the stake for each of these candidates. It'll be I don't know. You can't call it a free for all, but it certainly is something that people didn't want to see. They'd like to have a clear cut deal because we've had so many problems in the past, all going back to Florida when Bush ran against the Democrat then. Don't remember his name. I have thought that it'd all be over again, but it's not. And there's some articles here, some information that you'll find very appropriate. First one is Trump's one-time White House chief of staff says the former president is not doing very well on the midterms and that Ron DeSantis could beat him in 2024. Former President Donald Trump and his then acting chief of the White House, yes, Mick Mulvaney, Mark Wilson, December the 5th, once upon a time. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis defeated Democratic Charlie Crist on Tuesday. Former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney told CBS News that DeSantis wins tonight. DeSantis is the governor of Georgia. He also said Trump isn't doing very well after several candidates he backed failed to win. And some of those were big doozies, I'd say. Disappointed. Former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney said early on Wednesday that his ex-boss, Donald Trump, is having a bad election night and that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has come out on top. Between being Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis tonight, you want to be Ron DeSantis, Mulvaney told CBS News. NBC reported DeSantis wins tonight and Trump is not doing very well. His comments came after DeSantis, largely seen as Trump's biggest rival, pulled off a huge victory over Charlie Crist in Florida on Tuesday night, who was his opponent for governor, which could potentially set him up for a Republican presidential primary in 24. Meanwhile, numerous Trump-backed candidates, including Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania and Tudor Dixon in Michigan, have underperformed or lost the midterm races, Insider and its election partner, DDHQ, projected. In Michigan, Dixon lost a gubernatorial race to Democrat Gretchen Whitmer, while Oz, a celebrity doctor, was beaten by John Fetterman for a seat in the Senate. Related video, ex-GOP lawmaker, Tom would take back DeSantis' endorsement if he could. Ex-GOP lawmaker, as I said. In recent months, DeSantis has established himself as a favorite of the conservative movement and rival to Trump. Alina Habba, a lawyer for Trump, warned DeSantis against a 2024 bid earlier this week. Neither Trump nor DeSantis has officially declared plans to run for president in 2024. But both are rumored to be potential candidates, with the former president hitting earlier this week that we will make a big announcement on November 15th. Mulvaney, who served as Trump's chief of staff from January 2019 to March 20, has been critical of his former boss, whom he once called a terrible human being. He told CNN in July that Trump is the only mainstream Republican who could lose the White House in 2024. Mulvaney also said that he wants to see a new generation in the Republican Party that would include DeSantis, former Vice President Mike Pence, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, or former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley. Donald Trump's top endorsements to watch on election night. Trump has made his endorsements a cornerstone of his post-presidential life. Tonight, his hand-picked candidates are running in some of the most closely contested races. Mehmet Oz, Herschel Walker, Kari Lake, John Gibbs are some of the hopefuls to watch. Donald Trump ensured he was on the ballot Tuesday night, even if all he could do was wait for the election results like everyone else. The legally challenged, twice impeached former president has put great effort into continuing to rebrand the Republican Party while in his Mar-a-Lago home. He made more than 250 general election endorsements, according to Ballotpedia. Many of these endorsees have echoed his lies that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from him. Top Trump endorsees, former reality TV star Mehmet Oz and other author J.D. Vance could help Republicans hang on to seats in Pennsylvania and Ohio, respectively. Trump also weakened nominees in key races like Colorado's Joe O'Dea, one of the few candidates in a few significant Senate contests to win without the former president's blessing. His ire also reportedly chased away sitting governors from challenging Democratic Senators Mark Kelly of Arizona and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. Trump's picks could become eager allies for a man seeking to join Grover Cleveland as the only former president to reclaim the White House. He is expected to formally announce his candidacy soon after the election. Here are some of his most high-profile endorsees, and I have given you those already. Nevertheless, there's a candidate battle is developing. One, Ron DeSantis, and the other, Trump. He's the other. I've got a piece here I liked. Midterms, Biden's agenda, and the filibuster. March 2, 2021, when he had been president less than 2 months, Joe Biden met with a group of liberal historians in the White House East Room. The subject was Biden's determination to be one of those most consequential presidents in U.S. history, according to an account in Axios. The group talked a lot about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal, Biden's model for the think big, go big mentality, but characterized the first months of his presidency. The president has giant plant seeds teed up that could make Biden's New Deal the biggest change to governance in our lifetimes, Axios wrote. It was all a little ludicrous, given one fact: Democrats had the barest of majorities in the House and no majority at all in the Senate, where a 50-50 tie gave them control only with a tie-breaking vote of Vice President Kamala Harris. Roosevelt had huge majorities in both houses of Congress when he pushed reams of far-reaching legislation into law. Still, it's fair to say Biden punched above his weight for a while. First, he passed the American Rescue Plan, a giant $1.9 trillion spending package, ostensibly devoted to COVID relief that flooded the economy with unneeded money and helped worsen the inflation that has marked his time in office. Then he passed, with a lot of Republican help, a giant $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. And then, after much drama with the crucial assistance of Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, he passed a giant $450 billion climate change and healthcare bill, misleadingly called the Inflation Reduction Act, which purported to help solve the problem exacerbated by his first big legislative achievement. So, for a president with a tiny majority in the House and none at all in the Senate, Biden managed to do a lot of damage. But now that is about to end. If Republicans win control of the House in the next midterms, as they are all but guaranteed to do, and it didn't happen, whatever remains on the president's legislative agenda is over. It will not pass. The Republican House leadership, headed by Speaker Kevin McCarthy, will not help Joe Biden go big. It will not help him go anywhere. In the Senate, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, should that come to pass, would not be much more helpful. A recent New York Times analysis tries to explain the news to the president's supporters. For President Biden, the dreaming of FDR phase of his presidency may end a little more than a week, the Times wrote. If Republicans capture one or both houses of Congress in midterm elections, as polling suggests, Mr. Biden's domestic agenda will suddenly transform from a quest of New Deal 2.0 to trench warfare, defending the accomplishments of his first 2 years in office. The Times stresses the efforts Republicans might make to undo some of what Biden has already done. While the GOP will indeed stop Biden from doing anything new, it is unlikely that will actually reverse much of what has been passed. For two reasons. One, Biden remains president. He can veto things. If he bills underdoing his accomplishments, may it through both House and Senate, Biden will be able to stop them, and there is virtually no chance Republicans will be able to muster the huge majorities needed to overturn a veto. The second season in the filibuster is the filibuster. Even if Republicans take control of the Senate, they are likely to have a 51 or 52 seat majority. Of course, that has not passed out yet. The real optimists hope for 53 or 54, but it's the best case scenario for the Senate leaves Republicans far short of the 60 votes required to pass legislation over Democratic filibusters, which will surely come. The legislative filibuster is the best barometer of hypocrisy in the United States Senate, and that is saying something. The late Republican Senator Frederick Thompson used to describe it simply, if I'm in the minority, the filibuster is good. If I'm in the majority, the filibuster is bad. Simple logic to me is what it sounds like. The problem is the Senate changes hands. A senator who is in the majority today can be the minority next year. That, as it happens, is what happened to Democrats too soon. To cite one good example, in April 2017, when they were in the minority, 33 Democratic senators, including now Vice President Kamala Harris, signed a letter to the majority leader defending the filibuster. We are united to our determination to preserve the ability of members engaging in extended debate when bills are sent to the floor, they wrote. Therefore, we are asking for you to join us in opposing any effort to curtail the existing rights and prerogatives of senators. Back then, the filibuster was good. Less than 4 years later, Democrats had won tenuous control of the Senate, plus control of the House and the White House. Guess what happened then? The filibuster became bad. Eager to pass the Biden agenda, nearly all Democrats jumped on the board to eliminate the legislative filibuster. If it had not been for holdouts like Manchin and Senator Kristen Sinema, they might have done it because the filibuster was bad. Bad. Now, however, Senate Democrats face the prospect of returning to the minority. And you guessed it, the filibuster will again become good. Democrats will use it to stop the radical agenda of the GOP. It will likely not be a hair on fire urgent issue because Senate Democrats know they have a backstop in the White House, where the Democrat in the Oval Office will veto any unwanted legislation. Republicans might and probably get through the Senate, but the filibuster will once again be good. But that is all the details. The bottom line is that as far as the legislation that Biden and Democrats want to pass is concerned, the party will be over. With this Biden situation, he's probably going to, and it's coming out by more than one reporter, that he is probably going to run again for sure in 2024. And if he continues to approach as elections, Biden spends his economic record. I'd like to read some of it to you. This cause is going to help you understand better. The president's recent comments on Social Security, the deficit, and economic growth claim credit where it is not always due. White House officials have sometimes been forced to awkwardly correct President Biden's claims. Other times, they have doubled down on them. Credit Tom Brenner. As President Biden and his administration have told it in recent months, America has the fastest growing economy in the world. His student debt forgiveness program passed Congress by a vote or two, and the Social Security benefits became more generous than to his leadership. None of that was accurate. That's by Joe Biden saying that, and it's not the truth. The president, who has long been seen as embellishing the truth, had recently overstated his influence on the economy or omitted key facts. This week, Mr. Biden praised himself for giving retirees a raise during a speech in Florida. On my watch, for the first time in 10 years, seniors are getting an increase in their Social Security checks, he declared. The problem, that increase was the result of an automatic cost of living increase prompted by the most rapid inflation in 40 years. Mr. Biden had done nothing to make retirees' checks bigger. It was just a byproduct of the soaring inflation that the president has vowed to combat. In stops across the country in recent weeks, Mr. Biden has also credited himself with bringing down the federal budget deficit, the gap between what America owes and what it earns. This year, the deficit under our leadership is falling by 1.4 trillion, he said last week in Syracuse, New York. Ladies and gentlemen, the largest ever one-year cut in American history on the deficit. Left unsaid was the fact that the deficit was so high in the first place because of pandemic relief spending, including a 1.9 trillion economic aid package, and the president pushed through Congress in 2021, and which was not renewed. Mr. Biden was in effect claiming credit for not passing another round of emergency assistance. White House officials contend that robust tax receipts, which helped reduce the deficit, are largely the result of strong economic growth that was supported by Mr. Biden's economic policies. The state of the 2022 midterm elections, just to recap. Final landscape as candidates make their closing arguments, Democrats are bracing for potential losses, even traditionally blue corners of the country, as Republicans predict a red wave. The battle for Congress, with so many races on edge, a range of outcomes is still possible. Nate Cohn, the Times chief political analyst, breaks down four possible. It has come for presidents to spin economic numbers to improve their pitch to voters. Like many of his predecessors, Mr. Biden has emphasized economic indicators that are favorable to his record, including a low employment rate and the record pace of job growth in his first 2 years in office, a focus intended to win over an American public that remains deeply pessimistic about the economy, according to opinion polls. But it gets larger. Now it's here. Midterm elections have passed. They will determine the fate of the rest of Mr. Biden's legislative agenda. President's cheerleading and increasingly grown to include exaggerations or misstatements about the economy and his policy record. White House officials have sometimes been forced to awkwardly walk back and correct Mr. Biden's claims. Senior administration officials acknowledge that some officials have unintentionally misspoken about the economy on occasion, but denied that Mr. Biden or his administration had ever attempted to mislead the public about the economy. They said that this record requires no overstating. The president's economic agenda has given us an economy with historic job creation, faster declines in unlimited employment than prior recoveries and prior private sector investments in new industries throughout the country, a White House spokesman said. Where on occasion we have misspoken, as any human is loud once in a while, he has acknowledged and corrected or clarified such honest, quote unquote, mistakes. Mr. Biden's economic exaggerations generally pale in comparison to the sails spun by his predecessor, President Donald J. Trump, the former president whose lies included his insisting that he did not lose the 2020 election and that the Capitol was not attacked by his supporters on January 6, 2021, regularly boasted of the greatest economy in the history of the world, a statement not based on any facts. Mr. Trump also said his giant tax cut package paid for itself when it did not, and he relied on outlandish economic growth projections to make his budgets balance. Jason Furman, an economist at Harvard and a former Obama administration economic advisor, said some of Mr. Biden's recent contentions appear to be the types of leaps of logic that were common during election seasons. He pointed to the president's claim of reducing the deficit and overseeing an increase in Social Security payments as examples. This isn't like making stuff up, Mr. Furman says. It's just a matter of rather stretching and peculiar casual argument around true facts. He added Mr. Biden's messaging bore no comparison to the falsehoods Mr. Trump used to tell about America being among the highest taxed nation in the world, an inaccurate declaration, even the far higher tax rates in countries such as France and Denmark and Belgium. With President Trump, you had flat out complete factual errors. Mr. Biden's pitch has been centered on the notion that he is leading a post-pandemic transition to stable economic growth, and that if Republicans take control of Congress, they will look to scale back social safety net programs, shut down the government, and weaponize America's need to borrow money to pay its financial obligations. But as the United States has struggled to contain inflation, the Biden administration has at times resorted to cherry picking the most favorite data points or even out crucial context. In some cases, it has been a matter of presenting graphics that do not tell the whole story. For instance, a White House chart late last year depicted a decline in gas prices over a month as a significant drop. However, the rows of plunging bars showed a decrease of just 10 cents. Inflation has been the most slippery subject because, with Biden administration officials often focusing on different measures as they seek silver linings in monthly reports. The White House Council of Economic Advisors appeared to misstate the figures in an interview with CNN last month when she pressed about why core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, was at its highest level in 40 years in September. So if one looks month on month, it was actually flat. The monthly rate had actually risen 0.6%, a significant increase. The administration said that Ms. Rose has misspoken and intended to say that core inflation was unchanged for 2 consecutive months, not that it was zero. Well, I guess we're going to have to be on our toes listening to Joe Biden and his staff in the White House. Mr. Biden's comment to Jimmy Kimmel in June about America's rapid economic growth being the fastest world was contradicted by an International Monetary Fund reported in July that showed several countries in Europe and Asia were growing faster than the U.S. this year. The fund predicted at the time that the United States would slow, or at a sluggish 2.3% in 2022, grow rather, and further downgraded its outlook last month. In this case, the administration said that Mr. Biden was referring to pace of America's recovery from the pandemic compared to other major economies. The more recent presidential pronouncement at a forum in October that the student debt relief passed Congress was perhaps the most head-scratching. It was starkly at odds with the reality that Mr. Biden rolled out the initiative through executive action and was being challenged in the courts. A White House official said that Mr. Biden was referring to the package of the Inflation Reduction Act, which did not include student debt relief. And then Mr. Biden said September gas prices were averaging below 2.99 a gallon in 41 states and District of Columbia. They were actually $1 higher. The White House corrected the transcript of his remarks. Social security misstep has been portrayed across the spectrum as the biggest blunder. The suggestion by Mr. Biden that the increase in the Social Security cost of living adjustment was a sign of economic health through bewilderment from Democrats and scorn from Republicans after the White House reinforced the point to a Twitter post from its account on Tuesday. The only thing the White House can credit for is the historic inflation that led to the need to increase Social Security payments. Republicans in the House Ways and Means Committee said in a statement. By Wednesday afternoon, the White House had deleted the tweet. Karine Jean-Pierre The White House press secretary tried to explain its removal by saying the message was lacking crucial information about other ways older Americans were saving money through lower Medicare premiums. Look, the tweet was not complete, she said. Usually, when we put out a tweet, we post it with context, and it did not have that context. My, said the spider to the fly. I think that we expect our representatives to be honest, to be truthful, to have integrity, especially the president. But this man, John Biden, has little, if any, integrity. I want to thank my listeners and thank you for listening. It is important information, especially the information regarding the elections, which is still to come. So keep your TVs lit at night, just in case something is important. I want to listen to Searching for Integrity, which I am so glad that you tune into. So long and happy trails to all.